The Salt Key development became the issue of a line of questioning put to yet another minister on the stand. Senior counsel to the commission, Alex Mills, sought to find out what role the Honorable McAllister Hanschel, the minister responsible for lands and survey, had in the Salt Key Development Company, and more specifically, the construction of a dock on Salt Key. That project was being represented by one Stephen Kroll of Salt Key Development Company. According to Mill, a meeting was called by Honorable Hanschel less than 2 weeks ago on January 9th to find out the status of that project. It was evidence that at that meeting were Honorable Hanschel, the Premier, the Honorable Dr. Michael Mizik, Director for Planning Department Clyde Robinson, 3 members of the Planning Board, Otis Morris, Colin Williams, and Garnett Jolly, Director of the Department for Environmental and Coastal Resources, Wesley Clairvaux, and representing the Salt Key Development Company, Stefan Kroll, and what was described by Hanschel as an unnamed technical person. Hanschel and Mill had conflicting accounts on what took place in that meeting, the reason for the meeting, and the end results of the meeting. According to Hanschel, the meeting was held to find out what was holding up the progress of the project, which had been in the making for many years. He said the reason that not all members of the planning board were present was because of their own failure to respond to a text message that he had sent out inviting them to the meeting, which was held at the Premier's office. His reason for inviting the Premier and the Salt Key DevCo representatives were because he felt that the leader of the country, the Premier, should be kept abreast of the development with an impact on Turks and Caicos Islanders, and that Kroll and his colleague were only brought in to relay their role in the project. He said once they did that, they were asked to leave. Once they left, he said, there was the discussion about why the project had not been progressing. According to Hanschel, Wesley Clairvaux of the DECR expressed that there were concerns over the proposed location of the dock, whether it should be placed on the north side or the south side of the island. According to Hanschel, Clairvaux said that the south side of the island contained a dive spot which contained coral. The more appropriate location would to be put on the north side near the White House, where the salt industry was operated years ago. Honorable Hanschel maintained that the meeting was very informal and only a means to find out why the project was not proceeding. Mill's account of what went on in that meeting was completely different and coincided with the statement made by former chairman of the planning board, Earl Hanfield, in his announcement of his resignation during a press conference yesterday. Mill had not seen the news of the press conference, which was televised on news stations last night, but went on to suggest that the meeting was a result of a recommendation to Honorable Hanschel's ministry rejecting the construction of the dock until a development plan was complete. Mill further suggested that the meeting was called in order to put pressure on the members of the planning board to approve the construction of the dock. To back up these suggestions, Mill referenced another meeting that took place that same day, a meeting called by the vice chairman named. Mill further suggested that the meeting was called in order to put pressure on the members of the planning board to approve the construction of the dock. To back up these suggestions, Mill referenced another meeting that took place that same day, a meeting called by the vice chairman named unconfirmed of the planning board. At that meeting, held for some 24 minutes, Mill said, the planning board went away from its earlier rejection of the dock and approved it. Mill evidenced through the meeting's minutes that the director of the planning board, Clyde Robinson, who had attended the meeting at the Premier's office, did not attend the special planning board meeting that day. Later, through evidence from a letter from former planning board chairman Earl Hanfield to the commission, it was revealed that that special planning board meeting was called out of turn, as he is the only one permitted to call a meeting, which he said he didn't. Hanschel denied those suggestions, saying that he did not put pressure on members of the planning board to approve the construction of the dock, and he did not have a part in the special meeting that was called thereafter. That's where Mill's examination of Honorable Hanschel ended. But prior to that issue of the Salt Key dock, the issue of Caicos Oil's agreement with the government for the establishment of an extensive fuel storage system in the TCI was discussed. Mill questioned Hanschel on whether or not it would have been more proper to put the proposal to tender. Henschel disagreed, saying it was his idea and that the other companies in the industry who had existed before his had their opportunities to do the same. Mills suggested that being a member of the cabinet where the decision would be made was a conflict of interest. Henschel testified that he followed protocol when the proposal went before the cabinet by declaring his interest in the proposal and leaving the room while the decision was being made. Honorable Henschel was questioned by Mills on a few topics in isolation with no immediate suggestions, including whether he had any credit cards or other bank accounts in the TCI or in other countries. Henschel testified that he had none. He was also questioned on whether or not he had any affiliation or interest in Provost stevedoring, which holds an exclusive license for stevedoring on the island. Then there was the issue of the minister's loans. According to Mills, the loan of a little more than $1 million that Honorable Henschel had previously testified to borrowing from Saunders & Co. was given out in 4 different payments. From evidence, Mills suggested that the loans were not coming from Norman Saunders Jr. of Saunders & Co., as Henschel had testified, but from a number of lenders through a holding company that was set up and operated by the law firm. That evidence came in the form of an email exchange between Henschel and Saunders Jr., where Saunders Jr. sought repayment on the loans, saying that he was being pressured by lenders. Henschel testified repeatedly that he had no knowledge of the other lenders, saying, quote, "I do not know the origin of the money. I borrowed the monies from Saunders & Co." He said he dealt with Saunders Jr. and Saunders Jr. only. No immediate suggestions were made about this evidence provided by Mills either. Mills is said to review the set of documents from Honorable Henschel that were recently presented to the Commission. After review, Mills will decide whether he wishes to question the minister any further. Until then, cross-examination from Henschel's lawyers, Ariel Mizik, continue tomorrow. For WIV4 News, I'm Joy Del Trail.